Testing. Testing. Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today is Umoja, Sunday, December the 8th, 2024. And we are going to talk about Kimoyo. And provide an argument for why the concept of African spirituality or African religion is inadequate for describing what is going on predominantly on the continent of Africa. And so this was my recent presentation at the ASCAC Western Conference that was held on yesterday, and it's going to be held today as well. And so this is just a slightly expanded version of the presentation that I gave on yesterday. So as normal, I usually do my presentations live on the channel, you know, if I go to conferences and the like, so that y'all can experience it. And so that's what's going down. So all that and more when we return in just a sec. And we are back. and just want to welcome each and every one of you who are checking out the live program. And of course, love and light to each and every one of you who are checking out the archives. And so, just a few announcements before we get started. Firstly, if you are on the Patreon page uh, and you haven't checked out our interview with Dr. Kaikosa Kajangu out of the Democratic Republic of Congo, I highly encourage you to check that video out. We were talking about his latest book. And right after this program, I am going to be interviewing our good brother, Jean-Claude Mboli. And we're going to talk about his new book, Ipopi Bantu, or Bantu Epic, from the Great Lakes to the Mediterranean. But this will also be exclusively on the Patreon page. And so I highly encourage everyone to join the Patreon if you have not. But that is what's going on. As a matter of fact, I have both of his books here, getting ready for the lessons and the like. So this is the first one, The Origin of African Languages. This light is putting a glare on this one, so you really can't see the title. But oh well, this is the book here, Origin of African Languages, and then here's the Bantu Epic book. So, love and light. And I was having, if I seem a little grainy in terms of the camera, that is because I'm using the laptop camera and not my other camera, but the other camera was acting up. So it is what it is. And so shout out to Sister Mika. She says, long time, peace and blessings to Brother Obama in the building. Brother Musoni is in the building. And I see from the avatar that somebody jumped over the pyramids. And we got X_G, peace and light to you. And of course, anybody else who has joined the conversation. And peace and blessings to LA, Oklahoma. Thank you for joining the conversation. And Brother Musoni asked, what does your t-shirt say? Black is not a race. Black is not a race. It is a vibe. I don't know if you can see that. Black is not a race. It's a vibe, right? It's an essence. It's a frequency. It's a spiritual channel, right? That you can only resonate with when you tap in with African ancestors. So that's what the shirt says, right? And and X_G says we got to charge Asar for his absence. And I keep saying I'm gonna keep coming back, but I'm doing these particular books, and they are taking up my time. But if you haven't gotten the latest book that was published, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1, Towards a Meaning for the Place Named Kemet, I highly encourage that you do. I also highly encourage that you get the book by Dr. Chilima Lima Mukinge, Muntu Wa Nzambi, Portrait of Human as God's Special Creation. And so right now I am working on the book dealing with, let me see if I could find a thumbnail. So, and I know I've shown these before. Hopefully they will show up here. So this is the book that I'm working on right now, Paths to Ma'at, Essays in Honor of Dr. Muba Bingay Bilolo. And so I'm in the midst of doing some translations. This is an edited work, so there are other authors who are part of this conversation, and but they sent their work to me in French and in Portuguese, and so I'm doing the translation work for the English version of this book. And then, of course, given our discussion today. The notes is these are basically some notes from the upcoming text and introductory guide to Kimoyo, a reconceptualization of African spirituality. And then in essence, you can argue that this is a part 2 to the Kimoyo quantum field theory as African heritage, exploring indigenous theories of the subatomic world. So, I've been kind of busy these days trying to hit y'all with some serious scholarship. And so, that when we do come, that we have something to talk about. And so definitely have some upcoming interviews that as soon as we secure the dates on these, then I can be more forthcoming about who I'm interviewing and what we're doing and the like. And peace and blessings to Kimway221. Thank you for joining the conversation. And so without further ado, I am going to start with the presentation. So let me just share my screen real quick. And we do the entire screen. We're going to do a full screen there. Let me just turn this so we can have, and I have my cell phone on the right. So hopefully I can, if there's any questions or comments, I can see them in time to address them via the chat. So let me just make sure. Okay, everything's a go. Okay, so here we go. So not African spirituality, but Kimoyo, redefining the world as an act of African agency, right? Now, as I stated, these are kind of notes from these 2 upcoming books. And so we'll have more to talk about in regards to these 2 texts in the near future. So we don't have to go there. So this is broken up into 3 parts. So this is part 1 where I state what the problem is. So why do I have a problem with the term African religion and African spirituality, right? So the statement of the problem that I put in the abstract for the conference, I stated that after over 2 decades of research of and participation in various African wisdom traditions, coupled with a deep study of African languages and comparative linguistics, it has become apparent that the phrase African spirituality, we can add African religion, is inadequate for labeling and describing the underlying philosophy behind African sacred practices. On this grounding, we suggest as a replacement term from the Kikongo language of Central Africa, the word Kimoyo, instead of African religion or African spirituality, right? So a good example comes from this text here, some kind of the shortcomings of the use of the term African religion and spirituality. So this is actually coming from an African's text, Dr. Anthony Ephraim Dancor. If you don't know about him, he is a PhD, but he is also a king in a region of Ghana, and I believe like in the southwestern area of Ghana, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can correct me in the chat with that information if they look it up. And so he has written a text called African Religion Defined. He has a number of texts, but this is one that he is more noted for: a systematic study of ancestor worship among the Akan. And so in the text, in the preface of the text, and this is the 3rd edition that I'm quoting, he says, researching for this project, meaning the book African Religion Defined, Two definitions of religion by E.A. Wallace Budge and Clifford Geertz, if I'm saying that correctly, greatly influenced me. In their works, one, From Fetish to God in Ancient Egypt by Wallace Budge, and The Interpretation of Culture, Selected Essays by Clifford Geertz, both authors define religion in ways that align with my own beliefs, culturally as an Akan traditional ruler. For example, Budge defines ancient Egyptian, and he puts in parentheses, African religion, which he refers to as ancestor worship, as the worship of the souls of the dead, while Geertz also maintains that religion is a system of symbols. And I find a problem with this because, again, this is, as I stated in the statement of the problem, this is a result of over 20 something years of deep study into African cultures, languages, and philosophy and the like. Being both a participant in many wisdom traditions, or in a few, I should say, wisdom traditions, and then, of course, just the academic study uh, an observer of different African traditions. And what I've found over the years is that, what is actually going on and how it is being described in the academic literature is almost two different things. And it's not to say that there is no ancestral veneration within the larger context of the so-called religious system, but that is, you can't define the system as ancestral worship. That's not what the quote unquote religion is, for the vast majority of African people, right? And it's definitely more than simply a system of symbols. What does that even mean? That, that African religion can be reduced to a bunch of drawings, a bunch of hieroglyphs? That's the religion? Is that what we're talking about here? And this is problematic. It's problematic for two reasons. One is because of uh the limited scope in terms of defining African religion. And then two, we have an African, born and raised, who himself is adopting these definitions and then working with that as a framework for his own text. And so, this is just to give you an example. There are others in which we can go. And so we have, for example, in this text, the Encyclopedia of African Religion, which was edited by Doctors Molefe Kiti Asante as well as Ama Mazama. And in the entry of Africism, it is written by Aloysius M. Lugira. And this author is suggesting that instead of using the term African religion, because he finds this phrase or this labeling problematic as well. And so instead of saying African religion or African spirituality, he instead suggests the word Africism. And I find this problematic for the simple reason that Africism is not itself, and it's not based in an African language, and it doesn't describe exactly what African religions are, according to my deep analysis, right? And so, but it's not to say that the entry is not valuable. Again, he does recognize the limits of the term African religion, thus the promotion of Africism, but um but he frames the argument in a very profound and very African centered way. And so he starts off with this Luanda uh, proverb in a Bantu language out in Eastern Africa, and it says, and I know I'm not pronouncing this correctly, but Cesarinya Bibi Lissa Nini Luo, which means an inadequate name disadvantages its bearer. He goes on to say, inadequate names which reflect inadequate understanding have not done justice to African religions. So he's telling us that, these labels that a lot of these Eurocentric scholars have placed upon African phenomena have been inadequate. And, he's bringing out this African notion that names mean something, and they reflect the character of that which is being named. And so when you mislabel something, it is damaging for understanding of what the concept really is. That's why when Africans name stuff, is very descriptive. It tells you exactly what it is, right? And so this notion that, inadequate names reflect inadequate understanding and provides a disadvantage for the bearer, if we're talking about personal names, you get a sense of why this is the case. For example, from a personal name standpoint, from the late Dr. Malidoma Some, from his text, The Healing Wisdom of Africa. And he states, for example, that the Daguerre believed that everyone is born with a purpose, and that this purpose must be known in order to ensure an integrated way of living. People ignorant of their purpose are like ships adrift in a hostile sea. They are circling around. As a result, tribal practices emphasize the discovery before birth of the business of the soul that has come into the world. A person's purpose is then embedded in their name, thus constituting an inseparable reminder of why the person walks with us here in this world. So he's saying that the name encapsulates the purpose of the person. And so if you name the person wrongly, you disadvantage them because they're supposed to live up to their name. It is a North Star guiding them towards their purpose, and you can lead them astray. At least that's the belief, right? And so you get a sense of the importance of naming and what it does, for example, among the Dogon of Mali. And so the famous text of Pale Fox by Griol and Diertelin, page 113, states, it is a well-known fact that one cannot mention the name of one who is absent without bringing about considerable effects in the unseen world. So this kind of tells you something, that a name kind of activates something in the spiritual world when an object is called. Like this actually explains a lot also from a Kimoyo perspective, right? The usual explanation of this phenomenon is that the mention of a name invokes the being whose name it is and compels it to appear, though its presence may be unwelcome. But nothing is said about the reason why the being should hasten to answer the summons of its name. The reason is that to utter a name is to bring into existence a form and a habitation. The best form and the most suitable habitation to receive the life force of the being invoked. So when you speak something into existence, you are activating, when you call it by its name, you are activating the vital force, the life force of that entity, according to the underlying philosophy of many African people in general, but especially of the Dogon in particular. In uttering the word, the speaker no doubt projects a force of his own, which is carried on the breath issuing from his mouth, and it is in fact one with it. but this force merely represents the force of the one invoked. It offers it a form and a voice. So you bring into being. That's why, you can't say ancestral veneration without understanding this underlying principle, because the calling of one's ancestors brings them, it helps them to continue living. It brings form. It brings them out of the spirit world and gives them form and voice. So it continues, this form, which will be the best suited to the one who is called, traps, as it were, his life force, compelling him to appear, to arise in answer to the call. So if you understand what is being stated here, you can understand the purpose of shrines, ancestral shrines dedicated to certain deities. And even when you read ancient Egyptian texts, you'll see why certain statues were locations for which they would call the spirit for which the statue was supposed to represent. They didn't worship statues. The statues were just locations to call upon, and that they have an entity, a house to dwell in temporarily while they're being engaged by the living person, right? So we continue. So now we're going on to part two. So now we're going to put the contextual framework together, and so this is my overall conclusion. And so the word Kimoyo, meaning vitalism, the art of regenerating energy, the science of healing, is the name we now use to refer to African spirituality without claiming that it represents all of Africa's wisdom traditions. However, it is the most dominant indigenous traditional system. Kimoyo stands on three foundational pillars. One, that God is vital power. Two, that God equals existence. And y'all have heard me argue this a million times on this channel. And three, this existence, therefore reality, is in perpetual motion, and that life is the result of the flow and interchange of vital power, which can be harnessed by human beings and used to empower all areas of their existence. Traditionally, this exchange of life forces was used for healing and the sustaining of community. The Kimoyo tradition essentially is a science of abundant living. And we'll see how all of this comes into play. And so, even though we don't have time to really kind of go through point 1 and 2, it is very vital for this, because it's not so much like in a Christian tradition or in the Muslim tradition where you are sitting there worshiping God, right? Like you're sitting there and praising God all day. You are participating in the God experience as human beings within the Kimoyo traditions. And when I say Kimoyo, Kimoyo is what we're using as a blanket term to replace African spirituality and African religion. So when you talk about Kimoyo, Kimoyo is learning about how to dance with the ebb and flow of the existence of reality, and how to harness, how to utilize, and how to transfer vital force, which is the God force, right? So now we go on to part 3, defining Kimoyo. So, as many of you all know, and as stated, I got the term Kimoyo from the Kikongo language, as articulated from the late Dr. Kimbwandinde Kiabonseki Fukiao out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And he passed away in 2013. November 29th. So we're just a few days from the anniversary of his passing. Um, and he has written several books, a few of them which you can see on the screen, at least the covers of the text. And there are other texts that were either published in French, published in pure Kikongo, um, or published in English or written in English but have not been published. And I have a few of those texts that have not been published that are in English. However, I don't have permission to share them, distribute them, or print them. But I have been given permission to cite these particular texts from the estate. So, so some ideas are going to come from some of the unpublished texts that I'll name a little later. And then, of course, some of these ideas are published in some of his other works that you can still get to this day, right? So when understanding the word moyo, Dr. Fukuyama in the text "Self-Healing Power and Therapy," page 115, informs us that moyo, according to the ancient schools of Africa, means vital power. So remember that from the conclusion, one of the pillars of the Kimoyo tradition is that God equals vital power. So in essence, moyo could be used as a title for the divine itself, since we're talking about equal concepts here, right? And um, so moyo means vital power. Moyo is what is the vitality of life itself. It is the key word to Kibantu, the Bantu way of life, their philosophy. Kimoyo, vitalism, is their religion, and it is not animism, right? Um, Dr. Fukuyama, in his PhD dissertation titled Digging Up the Past, An Approach to Fundamental Education and Community Development, goes a little deeper into the concept of Kimoyo. And it was actually after reading this that, I don't know how many years ago this was, that I started to use the word Kimoyo in place of African religion and spirituality, because I believe that this articulates better what is actually going on in African wisdom traditions and African cultures than the English phrase African religion and African spirituality, right? Because many people define religion simply as a literal tying back to God, but that doesn't make sense within an African context, because God equals existence itself, and you can never be separated from God. You are an aspect of God itself, having a human experience. And so it wouldn't make any sense within an African context to be using African religion, because religion from that particular point in understanding doesn't it doesn't find space in African philosophical circles, right? And then when you say spirituality, what is spirituality? What is a spirit according to in African? And are you making spirits? What is the ality in this? Like when you say reality, like what is the ality in the spirit? Is this simply because one invokes spirits? Is it simply spirituality is the practice of invoking spirits? Is that what the underlying thing is? Like when we're using terms and concepts, we have to be able to clearly define them and make sure that the labeling actually matches what is actually going on in these African community spaces. So we'll continue. So from the PhD dissertation, he states, as a matter of fact, the whole African religion, as one can see it in their aspect among the Bantu people, have two key words besides Nzambi or Kulunga. And so these terms are usually defined as God, but you got to understand that any name that you find for the most part in Africa for God is just a title, a descriptor of a particular major characteristic of the divine. So whether you're talking about in Zambi or Kanunga, these are particular principles that define the divine, right? If that makes sense. So we continue. These words are Ngolo and Moyo, force, energy, or dynamism, and life, vitality. It is here that the African religions and their aspect among the Bantu find the roots of their dynamism and their wholeness. They labeled these people animist in their religion animism. The word itself, related to anima, animal, says clearly what these scholars had in mind about African religion in general and about its aspects among the Bantu people in particular. The Bantu religion is not animism or animalism. Neither are the Bantu animists or animalists. The Bantu people are vitalists. This is accepting themselves as well as everything in the universe as part of Nkingu Amoyo, the principle of life in its wholeness. Their religion deals principally with force and vitality. A religion that does not believe in any physical being, but in Ngolo, Imoyo, Mudingo, Dingo. Force in life through Dingo Dingo, the natural way of life and change. This religion can be called dynamo vitalism, therefore Kimoyo. So it may take some rereading to really kind of understand what he's saying here, but I really and he expands on this not only in this text but in several different uh, texts outside of his PhD dissertation. But he's saying here, especially the word, if y'all get an opportunity, make sure that you read this text here at the bottom right hand corner, Simba Simbi. It's a very small text. It's really the whole book is probably like 6 or 7 pages, and half of it is in English, the other half is in Kikongo. But Simba Simi, but he really goes in on this and describing God not as a like a physical being, but as what he calls here Ngolo Ye Moyo Mudingo Dingo, right? And that is force and life through Dingo Dingo. And this word dingo that he uses from Kikongo, it it's a reduplication of a single word that comes from ding. It's a Proto-Bantu word that means to turn around, to wind around, to wrap up. So this concept of dingo dingo, in reduplicated form, is in essence talking about perpetual change, perpetual motion. So as I stated in the beginning, when we're talking about this principle of life, and matter of fact, when you go into the Dogon, when you go into many different places, the concept of life is associated with motion. And if we have time, I'll read that from one source. And so this is the cosmogram on the right hand side. And this is a visual of, kind of a unwinding spiral symbolizing dingo dingo, right? And so the word moyo itself has a concrete definition. And so it primarily in African languages, you'll see it meaning either the heart, the liver, or the lungs. And in many African languages, the word that in one language will represent heart, in another language will represent liver, and in another language will represent the lungs. So the we can surmise that in the proto language, this word had to deal with vital organs and thus vitality, vital life principle, because these are the areas that are vital to life. That's why they call them your vital organs. which is why a police officer wears a vest over their chest. It protects their liver, and it protects their heart and lungs. Because if that gets hit by bullets, then you have a greater chance of not living versus if you get shot in the arm or in the leg, right? Because that's the essential area of vital to life, right? And so the but outside of the concrete reality of the heart, liver, or lungs, it comes to mean abstractly life, spirit, soul, courage, will, desire, inclination, feeling, mood, thought. Because for just like in ancient Egyptian, the word ib, meaning heart, also means mind, right, and thought, because the seat of the intellect is in the heart. It's the core of you, right? And so in other areas, like among isiZulu speakers, Umoja is the pronunciation, and it also includes air, wind, breath, because what did I tell you? In other languages, it means the lungs as well. And so anything that's associated with the lungs. And so in Asante Twi, because of the association of the heart, it means blood. And then Chiluba has a doublet in the language, Mungi, meaning heart, right? And so we learn that Moyo is life and vitality. Kimoyo is vitalism, which can be described as the art of regenerating energy. So this should tell you what this perfectly explains exactly what is going on. And so you have to understand the process of gaining energy and losing energy. And what is the religion, quote unquote, is the art of regenerating energy. And we'll get more into that as we move on. And so it's the science of healing. And so Inkwa Kimoyo is a simply kind of we would say a priest in modern times, but I hate that word priest, right? Because again, it lends you to this kind of formal religious thought, and you think about like a Catholic priest or something to that nature, and these are just elders, wise persons, people with skills and the like. But it's defined as essentially Inkwa Kimoyo or Inkwa Moyo is this person is the personification of life itself, and one who is a fire starter in the community, a vitalist. And so when you're talking about someone who is described as Inkwa Kimoyo or Inkwa Moyo, this is a person that wherever they go, they enliven the place. There's increase wherever this person goes. And in many respects, this is what you would call like a high value person, a high value man, a high value woman, using today's language. Somebody in the chat says, in peace to brother Chris. So God is part anthropomorphic man. And I can't read that other word because I'm reading off my phone. And so for some reason, this little heart is right on the word. So I don't know if it says, so I'm assuming it says what? What then gods, correct? I'm not sure what that I mean. If you can give me a little bit more clarity on your question, I'll come back to it. All right. And peace to Melanated Goddess, and peace and blessings to Sissy RCC, who I saw in the chat. And it looks like Aphrodisian, if I'm saying that correctly. I apologize if I got that incorrect. So let's continue. And I know it's going to be a delay. So I'll await on your answer. So, okay, I see the question more clear now. So it says, "We are then gods," correct? And thank you, Sister Mika. It says, so let me read the question. So it says, "So God is part anthropomorphic man. We are then gods," correct? Correct. But it's not what you think, right? Because everything is God. Like, to be a god is really not that great. If I um can say so myself, because any and everything is divine, any and everything is God, right? But it's when you have titles, for example, like Inqua Moyo. An Inqua Moyo is a person who knows the science of adding life to life. This is what makes you, this is what distinguishes you from other entities in the universe, is your knowledge and understanding of what constitutes life and how to increase and add abundance to systems that you interact with, right? And peace and light to Black Panther, Mosi in the building, and Nathan Wilson, as well as Geoff Taharka. And he says, "Thank you very much, Brother Asar." From, and I can't read that other word, Joe, Sierra Civilization. So I'm assuming on the West Coast, in the kind of Senegambia area, if I'm not mistaken. Peace and light to you, good brother. Right. And so, so I'll continue here. So hopefully, Brother Chris, I will answer your question in kind of spurts throughout this conversation. So it'll all come together to where when I make a particular statement, your question will be answered. Uh, so Fukiao informs us that an Inqua Kimoyo or Inqua Moyo is an individual who believes in the art of regenerating power as the human healing process. Dingo dingo dia dia Kisina, right? And the word Inqua is the Bantu variant of the ancient Egyptian word Ankh, how we would say Ankh uh, in the ancient and in our kind of Egyptology speak, right? And so peace, yes, he said Senegal. So give thanks, peace, and light. Thank you all for joining, right? So I have taken Fukiao's definitions and kind of expanded and explained a little bit more in terms of what Kimoyo could, how it can be defined, right? And so Kimoyo is the what I call the art of adding life to life. It is the art of how he would say regenerating energy, and I would say of generating vitality and prosperity. It's a philosophy of abundance and expansion within knowledge of the ebb and flow of life, right? Of making things to flourish in all areas of life. It's about the healing power of giving and exchange, right? The healing art of open-hearted sharing. This is Ubuntu. This is Ma'at. Open-hearted sharing, right? And so I have a more scientific definition of Kimoyo as a natural and social vital force exchange system that produces kininga. And so you'll always hear Fukiao talking about kininga. And I went, of course, being a linguist, I have to go doing some comparative work. And kininga is a Kikongo variant of the word ma'at, right? And So, we normally define Ma'at as truth, justice, reciprocity, balance, and harmony. And uh, truth be told, these are different definitions for different words that are just spelled similarly in the ancient Egyptian language. But nonetheless, and one day I'm going to have to do a full breakdown of what you see on the screen in terms of the graphic, right? Um, but so when we're talking about judgment, Ma'at scales, Kininga, this is all in Congo, right? I just don't have time today to talk about ancestralization and the purpose for that. But Kininga, Kia being a prefix, the root is Ninga, meaning balance. A dialect variant of the same word is Lunga, balance. So Ninga and Lunga are the same word. They're just dialect variations. And so many of you in like Southern Africa, of course, will recognize this word Lunga here, right? And so we're reminded by the late Egyptologist Serge Sinaron in his text, The Priest of Ancient Egypt. Thus, the revelations of Ogotameli, meaning a Dogon, or of the Bantu philosophy, turn out to contribute precious information which helps us better understand certain aspects of Egyptian religious thought. But in this connection, there is little, if anything, we can expect from a reading of Plato. So he's letting us know here that if we want to kind of understand the underlying philosophy and crux of ancient Egyptian religious traditions, then we need to look into systems such as the Dogon and or the Bantu speakers. And of course, if y'all don't know this channel by now, we wholeheartedly agree here that this is the case. But we would add a deep study into the languages of these groups. For example, the Dogon and the Bantu speakers will bring greater insight into these ancient Egyptian phenomena, such as Ma'at, who we see a representation on the screen here with its meanings of true justice, straightness, balance, and order. And of course, y'all know that demonstration beats conversation. So when I say that Lunga and Ninga and Kininga and all that are cognates with the concept of Ma'at, I'm not talking out of my behind. Is based upon regular sound meaning correspondences. And so I'll just leave this here for a second for a few of y'all to look and to see what sounds and what graphemes correspond with each other. So we know based upon the Bantu languages that the M in Ma'at is a prefix that was fossilized in the language, and that the root is those phonemes or graphemes that are in the red on the Chicam section here on the left, and they correspond with the consonants L and Ng in Kikongo, for example. So when we get to, for example, so-called Ma, meaning real, true, right, just, fair, correct, proper, we have a verb form without the prefix lunga to be accurate, right, be exact, perfect. And we have the nominal form with the N prefix, which corresponds to ancient Egyptian M, Nlungu, justification, a state of being just, justice, righteousness, blameless, completeness, right? And so when you talk about Lunga, Lungu, this is the root of how we're mispronouncing as Ma'at. So this is how we reinforce what Dr. Sonaron, or Sonaron, as some would say, is talking about here. That thus the revelations of Ogotameli, and you remember that Ogotameli was the priest of the Dogon, or of Bantu philosophy. And so what we're trying to argue here is that ancient Egyptian language is Bantu, its philosophy is Bantu, its spirituality is Bantu, which we're saying is Kimoyo. Ancient Egypt is a Kimoyo um, practicing civilization, right? And so when we talk about Kininga and balance and wholeness and the like, this is how we know that these are the same concepts. So as a result of being able to prove and demonstrate that these are in fact the same word, just from two different related languages, reading up on the modern form gives you a greater understanding of how we can better define, for example, ma'at. So we'll substitute lunga with ma'at throughout, these next few slides. And so in this text here, Medicine Across Cultures, John M. Jansen and Edward C. Green states in a second idea, balance or harmony is necessary to a state of health. So we can define ma'at as health in terms of being in a state of optimal health in the relationship between an individual and the people surrounding him or her, as well as between the human community and the natural and spiritual environment. If you understand this, now you can understand what we mean by quote unquote religion in African traditions. Because it's about providing balance, making sure that the community relationships are in a healthy state. And we call that healthy state Kininga. In ancient Egypt, they called it Ma'at. Or how we pronounce it as Ma'at. It was probably pronounced something closer to what we find in Kikongo, Nungu. Right? The verbal concept Lunga refers to a principle of health in the Zulu Society of South Africa, Ngubani, 1977, and the Congo Society of Western Congo, which we have been discussing under Fukiao, and to a type of healer in the Luba influenced Tabwa culture of western shores of Lake Tanganyika. So Ma'at is all through the Bantu speaking areas. And so this is another text, Writing Nature Cultures in Zulu Zionist Healing. And they reinforce this notion that Lunga is when we're talking about balance, harmony, and the like, should be translated as also health and healthy. So now we have a more proper definition to translate Ma'at is health. And so in the study of Bantu healing rituals, Jansen sheds light on this when he argued that conceptions of health are captured in the notion of leading a balanced life. In Zulu, the root lunga used in greetings, wishing people health and well-being, include the notion of balance and harmony with the natural and social environment. So when we're talking about ancestral veneration, for example, remember that ancestors don't die per se. They exist in a community, in a village on the other side, but they're still part of our community. So when we're talking about social disharmony, family disharmony, the repairing of the relationship, not only with the living, it also includes the people who have gone beyond. So it's not ancestral veneration in the sense in which European anthropologists are saying. They're still part of our community. So in the same way that I would have to, reconcile with my mother if I offended her, I would have to do the same with my ancestors because they're trying to communicate their dissatisfaction with my behavior in the community or within the family. Right? All of that is Lunga, Kilunga, Kininga, Maat. To reestablish harmony and balance is thus a goal of the healing process. In order to achieve this, the rituals focused on the manipulation of places and relations to living and departed relatives to achieve healing. So when we're talking about a Kimoyo tradition such as Ma'at is focused on healing and health. That's the focus. Everybody that are experts in certain sub things are what we would call doctors, physicians. You know, that's why I don't like the term priest. They're not priests, they're physicians. Because the tradition for which they are finding themselves in is a Kimoyo tradition where the objective is optimal health in all systems of life. So they're not priests, they're physicians. And so this concept of Kimoyo has a fundamental objective of learning how to harvest energy, whether you want to call it Ashe in the Yoruba tradition, whether you want to call it Moyo in Kikongo tradition, whether you want to call it, Ka in or Okra in the Akan tradition and ancient Egyptian tradition, whether you want to call it Nyame in other West African traditions, it's all the same principles talking about vital force. So a Kimoyo tradition is learning how to harness vital force in whatever forms it takes place, learning how to utilize it within a system, and learning how to successfully transfer it to other systems. That's why I define it as the art of adding life to life, because you're playing hot potato with Ashe, and you can only hold it in your hand so long before you have to pass it on, because you can't hold it forever. You'll damage yourself. So it's learning how to harvest, but also learning, knowing when to pass it as well, right? And so we have a sense of this from another author. So we saw Dr. Malidoma Some earlier, who represented the Daguerre people, and we have another author who also represents the Daguerre people, but this Daguerre group lives not in Burkina Faso, but in northern Ghana. So we know that the colonial efforts have divided Africa into these arbitrary spaces, and it has cut ethnic groups in half, so that the same group of people is just, the Berlin Conference split them up arbitrarily. And so many of them reside in Burkina Faso, and a number of, we can say half of them, the other half of them reside in northern Ghana, right? So, but this is Dr. Alexis Bikanyi Tingan, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing him. You can find our interview on this channel, and make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. But he has written a text of Life and Health, the language of art and religion in an African medical system. Again, everything is always going to be focused on health. And that's why I say, if we're going to translate the words that in these different African languages as, a quote unquote priest, I would rather you translate it as a physician, because the whole system has to deal with health and well-being in different other living systems. So let's see how the Daguerre people translate Kimoyo into experience, right, in terms of their philosophy. So on pages 44 to 45, Tengan states, on the contrary, All things and beings have the spirit of life and are therefore animate and spiritual. As I think it was Brother Chris had asked this question. Remember, I said that God equals vital force and God equals existence equals reality. Everything is God. Everything is spirit and spiritual. That's why I say that when you say African spirituality, what does that even mean within the context of African philosophical systems? Because everything has moyo, everything has spirit. So, if I'm a geographer, I'm practicing spirituality. If I'm if I'm a swimmer, if I'm a whatever, if I'm just cooking, if I'm a chef, by definition that's spirituality. So we got to get more clear when we're making these definitions. So let me start over. On the contrary, all things and beings have the spirit of life and are therefore animate and spiritual. All things and beings share a common life spirit that is continuously circulating between bodies, objects, and beings. So there's a vital force that is trapped within a body system, and that vital force of that spirit is being utilized by that body. But then there's no permanent things. That body has to dissipate, those cells have to detach, and become other things, right? But that life force has to transfer into another entity, right? So this is what he's saying here. So that common life spirit is circulating between bodies and objects and beings. Religion, art, and healing are linked in diverse ways to ensure the proper transference of life spirits from their sources, namely the earth and the sky rain via death, to animate different bodies and beings. So death is the process of releasing life force spirit so that it can animate something else. In order for this to happen, the two main life forces and life sources, therefore earth and rain, are perceived as the two ancestral progenitors of all life, and together occupy the global universe, which is divided into two homesteads. As life progenitors, they are also the first ancestors and remain the principal focus during ancestor worship. So you can see here it's about life transference, harvesting, utilization, transmission. And so he continues, life origins, its transmission and sustenance, and sustenance within different bodies and beings are basically the foundations of any medical system. As already stated in chapter 1, the space below consists of the earth space as the protogenitrix mother figure that is further segmented into two prototypical domains that are further fragmented and located randomly to cover the whole of the land and atmospheric space of the earth. These include, I'll skip that and go to the highlighted part. Life is derived from the creative energies of all these agents acting together as engaged parents with all living things and beings as their offspring. Life processes, especially regarding transmission, sustenance, and maintenance, can only and effectively take place if there is a proper understanding and use of this language, which, for want of a better word, I will refer to as the proto language of life. In ancient Egypt, they called this Medu Neter. In Yoruba tradition, we call this Odu Ifa, which we can translate as the proto language of life. The process of healthcare, in particular, as I will demonstrate later on, involves three dimensions, including the proper transmission of life from one source to another, the proper sustenance of this life within the second source to ensure its full growth and viability within the life space. And lastly, the proper passing on of life to its original source, where it would be recycled. This is Kimoyo. This is the essence of what's going on across the continent. This is the basis of it. And so we get caught up in the aesthetics in terms of certain African dress, certain rituals, et cetera, et cetera. They all have as a fundamental basis this notion of harvesting, transmitting, utilizing, and passing on the life force spirit to be recycled back into, this infinite closed space that we call reality. And so to understand what is going on, we have to fundamentally understand systems. And so these are common characteristics of systems: having inputs, outputs, throughputs or processes, feedback, control environments, and goals. Right. And I wanted to kind of show like a real simplified system, right? So this is a common electrical circuit. So we have a source which provides the ashe. We have channels and conduits of opposite polarities. So something that is, grounds, and something for which, channels the ashe. A switch which turns it on and off. And then, of course, the objective and the goal to produce light, in this particular example, via a light bulb, which we can use to work on the car at night, or to roam through the forest, or just simply provide light where, sunlight is not abundant, where we can just open up some blinds or a window in a house somewhere, right? So this is a system. These are different components that are linked together, for which energy flows in the form of protons and electricity, what I should say, in the form of electromagnetism and electricity, where it kind of transfers into protons here, and which we observe in the context of light, right? So this is a closed system here, but it's a system nonetheless. So when you think about, for example, your body is a system of systems. You have the endocrine system, what I'm saying, your organ systems, you have your lung systems, you have your skeletal system. Like, all of these different systems are working in conjunction. And if we go even smaller, now we got to get to cells. We have, good and bad bacterias. And then if we get microscopic on them, now we're talking about atoms, quarks, and all of these different things working in conjunction. These are systems, but they're all kept alive by a vital force, which we call moyo, which we call ashe, which we call nyame, which we call ka or okra, which when we translate that into English, the words that we usually use are soul and spirit. And the ashe, in order to sustain the living system, has to come in different forms. So you have ashe in the form of oxygen, ashe in the form of food, ashe in the form of water and other liquids. You have ashe in the form of minerals. All of these different things are transferred. The ashe from this is transferred into the development and sustaining of cells and blood, and that allows for the system to operate. And then it has to, the ashe has to transform into waste And we have to get rid of that waste in various different forms, whether we're talking about body heat, whether we're defecating, whether we're talking about exhaling, because we inhale oxygen, but we exhale, what is it, carbon monoxide? Not carbon monoxide. Um, one of you medical folks, um, tell me what it is that we exhale. I forgot off the top of my head, right? This is all a system. And we know that we are in a state of kininga, we're in a state of lungu or lunga or ma'at if everything is functioning right. But let's say, for example, using our graphic here, that there was a nick. Yes, Musoni, carbon dioxide. I'm saying monoxide. I'm like, no, that's a poison. So if there's a nick, for example, in the wiring here, the energy in the form of electrical pulse or whatnot will not be as potent, and the bulb may light, but it may not be as bright, or it may flicker because there's something interrupting the flow of the ashe. And when we have an interruption in the flow of ashe, we have what we call disease. This is being in a state, in an unhealthy state. And especially if we totally cut off the circulation of electricity, the system dies. Just like if we cut off, if you know, you in a fight and somebody puts you in a chokehold and cuts off your oxygen, it cuts off ashe. You have prevented ashe in the form of oxygen to circulate through the system, thus killing the system, because it relies on that ashe. You have put the body in a state of dis-ease. And so if you can understand this, you can understand Kimoyo, you can understand quote unquote African religion. Everything has to deal with all understanding systems, whether we're talking about environmental systems, whether we're talking about economic systems, whether we're talking about family systems, relational systems between husband and wife, community systems, state systems, world and interplanetary systems. The sole objective is to maintain healthy systems. That's what the religion is. And then we codified, we put provisions in place to ensure that the systems run in a healthy state. That's where ethics come in. People mistake ethics for religion. That's ethics is not religion. Ethics is not Kimoyo. It guides how you do Kimoyo. It guides how you do religion, but ethics is totally different. And so when you have these stories, for example, of gods and goddesses, and you have these signs and symbols that represent concepts in these Kimoyo systems, that's not the religion either. That's a phenomenon we in English call pedagogy. And how we teach and how do we transmit values from generation to generation. That's where the aesthetics of the quote unquote Kimoyo system comes into being. That's totally different. That's not the religion. Right? And so how we harvest the ashe, again, understanding and understanding the proto-language of life, to use Tengan's language, is based on a system of binariness. Like in the Odu Ifa, how like symbolically the Odus are represented by single and double strokes, meaning on and off. Same thing in the I Ching, in the Chinese tradition. In Kikongo, they deal with what we call Kala Ye Zima, to be and to extinguish, basically on and off, which would be in Yoruba language, Oyeku for off, and Ogbe for on, right? And Fukiao, this is one of his unpublished works, it's called Knowing About. And he gives some insight into the Kala Yizima principle. And you can get some more also in his, he does a very good explanation in Self-Healing Power and Therapy book as well. So the Kikongo expression, Kala Yizima, to be and to extinguish, used for human beings and other living things, has also for variant Lema Kwama Yezima, mostly used for light in engines. It signifies to kindle and to extinguish. Each one of these expressions accomplishes the alternative actions of on and off mechanism. For the Bantu, especially the Congo, living is a process of on and off, Kala Yizima. Their philosophy, therefore, is basically a bio-centered system of thought. It is the on and off Kala Yizima of life and its vitality in their wholeness. To be, Ba or Kala, and to live, Zinga. That's another variant of the word. Matter of fact, it's the full variant of the word Ankh in ancient Egyptian. So you have Inkwa as the reduced form, and then Zinga, like An and Zinga, meaning Unk. And so when we say Unk, it's not pronounced Unk. That A that is in front of the N is a consonant, and it is like a D or a Z sound. And so that's what becomes Zinga in Kikongo. To live, Zinga, Unk, is to kindle, inflame, and shine. Life itself, in this sense, is fire and energy. Tiaye and Golo. This fire and energy that produces the on and off mechanism are the substructure itself of the Kimoyo. See, this is now we're getting into some of the deeper stuff, which I have to discuss in the quantum mechanics or quantum field theory as African heritage texts. Because now we're dealing with quantum stuff, and we don't have time to really go into it. But African thought is deep. So let me go back. This fire and energy that produces the on and off, the lemma, shine, yizima, to shine or to extinguish or to be or to extinguish, on and off mechanism, are the substructure itself of the Kimoyo, the real African Bantu religion in their Kibantu, the Bantu philosophy. So I hope you're catching these little nuances here. So when we're talking about Kimoyo or African spirituality or religion, is deeper than what, simply ancestor worship and signs and symbols, as those two European authors at the beginning of our discussion tried to articulate. So understanding this, you can see where the concept of the repair comes in. So, for example, Lorenta Magessa in the book African Religion, The Moral Traditions of Abundant Life, states bondedness is the key to the understanding that what falls on one falls on all. In such a relationship, the issue is the reestablishment of community, the reestablishment of the circulation of life, of Moyo, so that life can go on transcending itself. go on bursting the barriers or the intervals, the nothingness go on being super abundant. The ethical consequence is that we must repair every breach of harmony, every wound and lesion. We must demand reparation for ourselves because we are not merely ourselves, and for others because they are also ourselves. The what and who of our pre-existence and survival, the what or who of some manner of our presupposing ourselves. So if we go back to this, so if there's a nick here, the Kimoyo, the religious practice, is to find a way to repair this component of the system so that we can have the ashe or the moyo flow through the system again, to bring it to a state of kininga or ma'at. That's what the religion is. It's about learning how to regenerate energy. When the system of Ngolo, the power is drained and it becomes weak, you being the physician, the priest, knowing how to regenerate and bring the system back to an optimal state of health. Right? And so we in Dr. Fukuyama's PhD dissertation, Digging Up the Past, he goes into this. He says to be in good health for the Bantu in their traditional concept of Vimpi, health, is to be, which is Seneb in ancient Egyptian, is to be in possession of sufficient amount of Ngolo, energy or body electricity, in one's body for the betterment of its functioning. It is to be in total harmony, balance, Kininga, not only with the global unity of the social body of the community, but also with the wholeness of the universe. On the contrary, to be sick is to lose or to be in the process of losing one's Ngolo, seeing one's Ngolo diminishing, which would be in the ancient Egyptian, Ngolo is equivalent to the word Uja. So, like in that phrase, Unk, Uja, Seneb, Uja is the word Ngolo. So you can say Zinga or Inkwa Ngolo Vimpi, right? This is Kuluka Ngolo. It is to be in total or partial chaos or conflict with the social body will of the community. So to be in a state of weakness or disharmony is Isfet in ancient Egyptian, but in Isizulu, that word Isfet is Izibute, which is the spirit of conflict. So when the system is in conflict and the overall health and the life of the system is in jeopardy, we have to call a physician who understands Kimoyo, how to add life to life, to come and resuscitate the system. That's the religion. In other words, to be sick is to run out of the dingo dingo of life, to run out of motion, right? And we do this through ritual. And ritual, according to Maladoma Some, is the principal tool used to approach that unseen world in a way that will rearrange the structure of the physical world and bring about material transformation. So remember when Fukuyama was talking about the Kala Yizima principle, and that this is what underlines, which undergirds the functioning of the Kimoyo system. It's the substructure. So now you're dealing with on an atomic, what the ancients would call the quote unquote spirit world, spiritual level and plane. And so that's where ritual comes in. Ritual is designed to access the subatomic so that it can do it, we can rearrange, as he say, the structure of the physical world through the unseen world, right? And that language for which we communicate is something like Morse code, or Morse code, as we would say. So I equate ritual in essence kind of like Morse code. And if you know what Morse code is, it is a series of taps or sounds that represent letters for which you can combine to create words that you can transmit over long distances without having a verbal conversation with somebody. So this is the kind of the proto language um, of life in this particular type of form. So hopefully I've explained myself well. So we have kind of a few more minutes, and I have to do an interview right after this. So I will stop sharing my screen, and I appreciate each and every one of you all for joining the conversation. And so if you have any questions or whatnot, or you want to join the panel I'll probably do 10 at most 15 minutes to join panel. So I put the link in the chat. So if you want to join the panel, you can click on that link, and it'll bring you backstage, and then I will add you on, and we can take a quick commercial break. So we'll be right back in a second. So make sure each and one of you already. So peace and blessings to Chilimbwe. He says I joined. He or she, I'm not sure, said the day of join a bit late, but phenomenal breakdown as usual. I appreciate your commentary. And it's kind of late now. So, okay, she said it was good now. So, the new Israel doctrine, peace and blessings, good brother. Let me see, brother Chris, this may sound trite, but how did our ancestors create and develop all this spiritual science? It boggles my mind at times. Yeah, it's what, for me, what is interesting is that, of course, we've been on the planet for quite a while, and they just have managed to reduce thousands of years of insight into very simplistic units that is once you understand it and once you're a part of the culture, it's not really difficult. It's real simple, and it's so simple that like you almost feel disappointed that is not something more, but at the same time you're in awe that they're able to simplify it in such a way, right? And I think that has kind of been a major quality of African people, is being able to simplify very complex things. And so, of course, a lot of this stuff is explained in wisdom institutes over time, through the socialization and educational system. So you get layers and layers of unraveling as time progresses, just like in a modern university system. So you have to take some prerequisite courses, and then more and more is explained as you get into the system. Let me see. And Sonia says, yes, in my language, Ashisonga is Lunga, which speaks righteousness and rightness. Indeed. And Cosmic Abidemek Senkopi says, I don't know about that particular statement. I'm not sure who or what statement you're speaking of. If you do remember and you're still here, please type it into the chat. And just a reminder that this is an opportunity. If you want to join the panel, you can. I have put the link in the chat, and I just pinned it to the top, just in case some comments have moved it up or not. And let's see. And Nathan Wilson says, I just joined. I'm going up, so this was a lot earlier in the conversation. Is this related to Obayi in any way? In many respects, yes. And so just kind of a recap. The word Kimoyo I'm putting out there as a replacement term for African spirituality. And these conversations that I'm having about Kimoyo is to help us to understand what really is African spirituality beyond what the European academics say when they're trying to describe what is going on in the African space. And so the Obaya tradition is still a Kimoyo tradition. So I'm not using Kimoyo to replace the names of individual wisdom traditions in Africa. So the Kimoyo is just what I'm using as the blanket term for, quote unquote, African spirituality or quote unquote African religion. But whether you're talking about the Isheshe tradition amongst the Yoruba, the Akan system, the isiZulu, they all have their particular terms for what they do. But I'm just providing an African labeling for a common set of practices and underlying philosophy that we find on the continent, including the ancient Egyptian. And so if we understand what Kimoyo is, then you can go into for example, the ancient Egyptian records and start looking at their rites and rituals and get a better understanding of what is going on the continent. You get a better understanding of what is going on in ancient Egyptian records that have survived, and get some better insight. So I see we do have one person. Hold on, let me hide that comment. There we go. Peace and blessings. We have Anthony McHile. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Peace and blessings to you too, brother. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, it's Max Fail. It's Max Fail.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, man, I just want to say, man, it's an honor to be on the show, man. I've been watching you for a few years, you know what I'm
saying? Indeed, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll be brief, man. What I wanted to ask you was about, okay, I was doing, I'm from Louisiana, man, and we got this thing that I know a lot of people call it hoodoo. You know what I'm saying? They call it hoodoo. You know, that's I mean, that's what they call it. You know, we just growing up, we just knew that's just what we did. You know what I'm saying? And as I got older, I learned that it was from Africa. You know what I'm saying? It goes back to Africa. And like, you know, and like in my research, you know, like it's kind of linked to sometimes it's linked to West Africa, like among the Airway people or Con people, but it's also linked to Central Africa. You know, and the like among, I think to the Bakongo people, I think, you know what I'm saying? You know, but some
Mm-hmm.
elements of it, you know what I'm saying? It was some different elements, and I just wanted to get your view, man. What you thought about it, man? You know, the African connection, you know, the hoodoo. That's all I want to know, and I knock off, bro.
I'm trying to find. Damn it. Um, I'm trying to find.
Excuse
Where
me,
did
bro. Hey,
I?
bro, can I say one more? Can I say one more thing before I go out?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, it was a word. It was a word that I was looking at like because we got what we call like a mojo bag down there. We use a mojo bag. It's like a lucky charm. So I was just looking it up to see if it was any African origin in it, like for the word, and I know that it went back to the Congo. You know what I'm saying? And then I was looking at the word hoodoo, why they call it hoodoo, and I looked up. It was an area word called hoodoo, HUDU. It basically meant like a root worker, like a worker in medicine and stuff, roots. And that's what we call it down here. We call it roots, not hoodoo. We call it roots, and I knock off right there for good.
Yeah, I'm not too sure of the root of hoodoo in terms of the word itself, but how you explaining it may come from Benin, and that's something I will have to um, look into. But just the way that it sounds like some Benin stuff. And so what I'm trying to find on my computer here is I downloaded a number of um, book covers, and can't find it. So I'm just gonna have to just kind of pull up the book itself. But I wanted to just kind of upload the the covers, and I don't know where and why I can't find these. Oh, here we go. So here's a book that um here we go. Okay. So I'm a highly recommend that you get this book here. Especially you being from Louisiana. So it's called Jazz Religion, the Second Line in Black New Orleans. And there's the author shows um and demonstrates the relationship between voodoo and New Orleans culture, especially with the large flux of immigrants coming in from Haiti after the Haitian Revolution into Louisiana. And so you have the voodoo mixed with the native hoodoo, and with some other factors in mind, this is how you get the Mardi Gras Indians, jazz, this the whole jazz funeral things, all coming from these traditions. And so this particular books, and there's some others that I can recommend as well that says the same thing. So like so that's Jazz Religion, the Second Line in Black New Orleans. And this one is the world that made New Orleans, from Spanish Silver to Congo Square, right? And it's another one that I'm going to. What was it called? Uh, should I do? mean, you can get Africanisms in American culture as well. And then the other one is Jazz in American Religion, Spirits Rejoice, Jason C. Bivens. Right. And so when you examine all of these texts in conjunction and you go through their resources, I think you'll get a better understanding of how, hoodoo and all of that becomes a staple in Louisiana, and how it's contributed majorly to just African American culture in general, in terms of certain ideas spreading out from that Louisiana center. And so, Louisiana always holds a special place for me because that's where most of my family is from, and both on my mom and dad's side. So primarily in Opelousas and in New Orleans. And so,
yeah, I'm a tree boy.
Indeed. And so, but just the whole state itself. So New Orleans gets kind of all the shine, but it's these other places as well that have this major contributions and these interactions between folks. And then you got to talk about certain Louisiana migrations into Texas, like in East Texas and in Houston, Texas, and the like, and how that shaped the culture there as well. But if I understand, you were breaking up a little bit when you was explaining the mojo bag. But just to let you know that the word mojo itself is the word moyo in the word Kimoyo. Right.
Yeah, that was my understanding. That's what I researched. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same word. So when you're talking about, you're getting your mojo working before the party, you know what I'm saying? It's the same, principle. So that I'm one of my objectives is not to try to introduce something that's foreign. I want everybody to understand that we all have a variant of these particular concepts, right? And this is something that you in many respects you're more than likely already familiar with, but we just have to put it in a framework that people can connect the dots for themselves in their own lives and add to the conversation beyond what it is that I'm saying, right? And you've done just that, even with your line of questioning. So I do appreciate your question. Indeed. All right. So let me see. And peace and blessings. And again, thank you for joining the conversation. Let me see. What are you saying? Let me go back up. Please drop the full title of Fukiao's dissertation, Digging Up the Past. Let me. If you send me, so here's, I put it in a chat, the full name of the dissertation. But if you send me an email at info@asarimhotep.com, I put it in the chat, I will send it to you. So, so let me find my email address. There we go. So if you send me an email at this email address, info@asarimhotep.com, and put in the subject line Fukiao dissertation or something to that nature, so I know exactly what it is that you're emailing me about, and I'll reply to you with the dissertation. So either as an attachment within the email, or I'll upload it somewhere where you can download it if the email is too big. So this email here, put Fukuyama dissertation in the subject, and I will make sure to get that true. So peace and blessings, our good brother Unc in the building. And let me see. I don't even know what y'all talking about here. He said, I saw you presented some of this work at ASCAC this year. Yes, I presented this dissertation. It's a smaller version, so it wasn't as long. But I presented this yesterday at ASCAC. And let me see. Machine learning says. So I've been meaning to ask you about some book recommendations as far as machine learning. I purchased the Mathematics and Linguistics earlier this year. Yeah, that's some advanced work stuff right there. And no, I don't have it. I normally have. No, it's at the. Let me see. I don't have it in this bag. It may be in my storage unit, but there's an introduction, because to do machine learning, you really have to get good at statistics. And so, because these are all, at the end of the day, statistical models. So they're going to have you learning statistics. And then from there, you're going to be introduced to, training, like large language models training. So you're going to have to learn the training mechanisms in terms of neural networks. And so, like in this one book, and I can't think of the name that I have. This is what I had to. This is the book that I had to use, for my introduction into this stuff. And so it's a statistics book, but the last few chapters have to deal with neural networks and the beginning discussions of large language models and the like. But you're definitely is going to be statistics. And Brother Chris said, I went to school in Texas. Line brothers from Louisiana. The ones were always strong and conscious. Indeed. So sorry, thanks for the info on the books. You're welcome. All right. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining the conversation. Again, I'm about to start another interview with our good brother Jean-Claude Mboli. So I have to end this conversation and start this other interview. So that will be on the Patreon page. So, but we have some more good stuff coming up. So thank you all for joining, and until next time, peace.
Tokyo wanna dose that. What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for and caught Uno. Came to kick the door with a game man judo. Pin game low, that's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595, check it for pack light. Hit the turnpike, slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 8-5. Oh, I'm so ready, by enemies necessary. We gon' be legendary, hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we about building, elevating the millions.
This program was created with the love and support of all our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.